I'll officially kick things off with my introduction. I am Brian Wellinghoff, as you see there. Been with Barry Wehmiller for 20 years now, and am honored to have been a co-founder with Michael Pearson and others of the Humanistic Leadership Academy, and honored to share this webinar with you today. And it's on care and accountability. And why do we bring this to the conclusion of the webinar series? Well, very personally for me, I find that I can be a caring person, that I can be a person that creates a spirit of accountability, but I'm often challenged to do those things in harmony or do those things simultaneously. And when I think about the classroom environment specifically, all right, I can pause, I can hit timeout, I can create space for caring and understanding and empathy, and we'll talk about those things today. But then there's this part of me that feels that I'm losing a sense of accountability or challenged by that. And on the flip side, I can create the right feedback, accountability structures, but then sometimes it doesn't feel fully caring along the way. And my goal today will be to, one, help dispel the myth that caring and accountability could in some way be in opposition or conflict with one another. And then secondarily, to look at some actual practices that you and I can engage in to help move that forward. If you're looking behind me, you might be able to see I'm also a proud father of 4. This also bleeds into my role as a parent. I teach inside Barry Wehmiller. I teach in a variety of universities that we're partnered with. I facilitate through the Humanistic Leadership Academy. And so this dichotomy comes up there as well. And so I'm going to move us from dichotomy to harmony. And that's my goal today with our presentation. Some of what you'll see are existing slides that we've leveraged in our organization for a while, and some are actually hot off the presses. I was inspired by Otto's presentation last week, where he gave us an insight to what will be becoming a book for him. And so some of what I'll share is based on our book, Everybody Matters, that you see here, but other elements are new training that we hope to bring into our organization in 2024. And so I'm excited to share that with you. If you're not familiar with our organization, our company is known as a provider of capital packaging equipment. But we've been dedicated to our culture and to living this movement of humanistic leadership for more than 20 years now. And that our manifesto from the book you see on the left there. And I'll highlight a couple things as Otto spoke about last week. Listening is so critical. Some people wish things were different. Listen to them. In an environment of care and accountability, people are achieving good things, big and small, every day. Let's celebrate them. The belief that leaders are everywhere when we can find them, that everybody wants to do better, so let's trust them. And in the end, if everybody matters, we need to show them. I believe that one of the alignments between care and accountability is that they're both actions. They're based within this be, know, do framework that, yes, we need to know what it means to care and know what it means to build accountability, but we also need to do and practice those things. And ultimately, it's hopefully an opportunity to live out our truest being along the way. And so in Everybody Matters, the tagline underneath, I wanted to write a little bit larger here. It's the extraordinary power of caring for your people like family. And so I believe in the book, in our larger Humanistic Leadership Academy dialogues, care seems readily apparent as something that's necessary for humanistic leadership. But oftentimes I get the questions and the musings of, well, how does accountability fit into that? And in some places, particularly in our manufacturing environments, accountability can be closely related to blame. It can be related to micromanaging. It can be related to some forms of control. And I'll stand up before you today and say that those are all pieces of my leadership history that I hope I'm not living out today, but I know what it's like to blame. I know what it's like to desire control. I know what it's like to be harsh in my accountability, but there's also something about, in order to truly care for people and create a future for an organization and for a movement, that accountability is part of that. And so one of the things that we offer is that when we think care is in opposition to accountability, or even if we think that it's something that we have to balance, all right, we'll give up a little care to have a little bit of accountability, it can be challenging to do either. And the fundamental idea, I think, here, which is very aligned to many of our other partners in the Humanistic Leadership Academy, is that actually building an environment of accountability, building an environment of follow-through, building an environment of mutual commitment to one another is very caring. And so the keys then are, how do we understand what that is, and how do we actually express it along the way? Barry Wehmiller has used this and these 6 drivers to help think about an environment of care and accountability. And we think about this inside of our business. We also think about it inside of our classrooms, our teaching environments, and things along the way. And so you see 6 drivers here at the top: purpose, personal engagement, the systems that people work in, the feedback that we provide, capability to do what we need to do, and then measurement systems along the way. And what I've put as dimensions down the other end is, well, understanding, well, what those things are, how we can do them, how we can practice them, and also to some degree, how much or how often do some of these things need to be hit upon. And while I would love to have the time to go more deeply into all 6 of the drivers here, for our time and focus, what we found is the 3 most critical and most critically aligned to humanistic leadership are purpose, feedback, and measurement. And so for each of these, I've shown you the what, I've shown you the how and the how much, and that's what I hope to walk you through in the remaining parts of my presentation, and then ask for your comments, questions, feedback, and engagement in the breakout session coming up. So for purpose, well, really the what is a defined, inspiring ability to connect people from their personal actions to the vision, to engage with storytelling and regular reminders, and how much, well, actually daily or weekly, and oftentimes more frequently when people are experiencing a lot of change. When I'm in higher education, when I'm in business systems, when I'm just walking around our neighborhood, it seems like an intense period of change for many places. And how we interact with that and drive it forward is really critical. I'll hit purpose first, but just to set up feedback, well, how do we give recognition for contributions, but also feedback to help people develop along the way? Building developmental environments is fundamental to how we can appropriately care for people. And then finally, measurement, that success is defined and that progress is made visible in a variety of different ways. All right, let me dive into purpose just a little bit. So it needs to be defined. The first one, and I didn't put a separate slide on this because hopefully it's somewhat obvious, is if we don't have a purpose, and if you prefer the term vision or why or mission statement, for purposes of today, I'm going to group those in the same area. But if it's not defined, it's challenging to build an environment where we care towards that vision or we hold people accountable towards that vision. And it needs to be inspiring and give people to connect their personal actions to how it would be seen. And so I like using a historical example along the way as we talk about purpose. So this is a real clipping from a London newspaper relative to the Shackleton expedition to the Antarctic. And I'm mindful of the historic sexist bias here, but I wanted to be accurate. And what was there, it's read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness. Constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." This isn't a purpose statement that I see often in my halls or perhaps yours as well, but the outpouring of impact is that they were hoping to get a couple hundred applicants for, I think, roughly 100 positions on the boat, and thousands of people showed up for the call, filling the wharf around the Shackleton expedition in London, going all the way around the corner. Why did so many people show up? Well, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness. It doesn't sound appealing in some ways, but it does provide something that many people found inspirational. Not all people would have found that inspirational, but many people found inspirational. They could connect how their personal actions would be aligned to it, that they would be working on this expedition to try to get to the South Pole, and that being honest and transparent about some of the hardships was actually enticing for some people, knowing that overcoming that would earn honor and recognition and personal respect along the way. One of the ways we've applied this in our business is how we think about building our safety culture. We're a manufacturing business. And so while I think safety is important to all cultures and organizations, particularly important for us, well, the first statement of purpose was the goal is to reduce lost time accidents. There's nothing wrong about that goal in that it's noble, it's worthwhile. But when we shift it over to the goal is to send our friends home safe to their friends and loved ones, we unleashed a new degree of engagement and alignment along those ways. And so we found that it was much more powerful, it was tangible, it was inspiring, and that people could see how their personal actions towards safety, moving something out of an aisle, reporting a near miss, could actually help those alongside be carrying. And so it was much easier to ask people to be accountable to the vision you see in orange here than the one in gray. And the other thing we found along the way is transmitting these just as esoteric statements, no matter how powerfully constructed, it's difficult to get that full inspiration unless we have an opportunity to really tell stories around that. Human societies for years have passed along wisdom through their storytelling. And we love this book, Made to Stick. So I want to give credit to the Heath brothers there to pull that together with it. It has a success model that great stories are simple, unique, concrete, connected, they have emotional, and they have sticky statements within them. And David, if I could ask you to put those elements in the chat, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video for you from one of our other co-founders at the Humanistic Leadership Academy and ask you to type in the chat when you see elements that fit any of these 6 success factors. And I'm honored to highlight a video by Patrick Struby. It's just over 3 minutes, and it's the opportunity to see what the Humanistic Leadership Academy is all about, but also look at how purpose can be defined well, and maybe you'll see some opportunities where it could be defined even more fully. I need to take down the share for just a moment, so I make sure I give you the sound, and I'll share again here and pull up that video. And I'm going to play this for you. David, let me know if there's any issues with the playback, but you see it's just over 3 minutes. As you're going through, type in the chat where you see elements that it's simple, that it's concrete, that it's those other elements of the success profile. Here we go.
When we look at today's world, and we see the global challenges.
We're not seeing the video, we're seeing the...
it is a result.
You are not seeing the video. My apologies. I'm going to try again then. Share screen. I've still got shared sound.
That's it. We have the sound. Yep, that looks good.
Okay, thank you for that.
When we look at today's world and we see the global challenges, it is a result of our leadership. And that's a leadership that is not humanistic. Why is it not humanistic? Because it only focusing on one thing, making profits for shareholders. When we look at where does it come from our education system. And it's an education system that is trimmed for companies to be profitable, to optimize, and to maximize shareholder value. So we start at the root cause. And this is what we want to do, what we're doing with the Humanistic Leadership Academy. And the goal of that is that we shape the leaders of the future. That humanistic leadership is a leadership that is holistic, that not only focuses on profits. There's nothing wrong with making profits, but not only. But it is more than just leadership. It is actually a mindset. The humanistic leader is a leader in every area of his or her life, whether in business, whether in the family, whether when she does her shopping. It is a mindset and a way of life. So why do we start with education? Because education forms the leader of the future. This is why our focus is on universities. And when we look at universities, where do we start? We have to start with the professors. Now, professors, by definition, are very intellectual because that's how the university system has been created. Now, for us, bringing in a humanistic management level means that we have to train the professors that they can get out of their intellect and connect more with their heart. When you switch on the TV and you look at the news, when you open a newspaper, when you go onto your social media channels, what you see is climate change, inflation, war, you get bombarded by bad news. What does that do to you? There is a general sense of overwhelm in society. And when you're overwhelmed, you're not creative, you're not happy, you're not a good father, you're not a good worker. What we do with the Humanistic Leadership Academy is we want to show what a solution looks like. Taking people from everything is a problem to here is what a solution looks like. And this is how we can transform the world.
I want to stop the video there and pull us out here and pull up the chat a little bit. I'd encourage you. I see some comments already. Please continue to add them. Peter said it's concrete, that it's about universities and its education. Professor is very intellectual, a sticky statement that connects with the heart. Yes, and if you don't know Patrick, he lives and exudes the message that you saw there. Founded Fair Trasa, co-founder of the Humanistic Leadership Academy. He's also a professor at Fordham University. James says, this reminds me of Otto Scharmer's The Heart as an Organ of Perception. Yes, there are connections between the various webinars that have been part of this series this year. Danielle is saying that it's simple. Transition from everything is a problem to how we get to a solution. The sticky statement, yes, here's what a solution would look like. And so I'll never hold, an example up as something that's perfect along the way, but I think it's a really great encapsulation of what we found important about purpose along the way. And by the way, that video is available on our website if it's helpful for you in your teaching or engaging other people interested in these ideas along the way. So that's kind of the first segment on purpose. And I'll share with you a little bit more about the idea of feedback. And so the simplest thing is actually captured in this slide, and it's at the top: to deliver feedback in a way that it can be received. Just last night, I wanted to give feedback to the contractor who is remodeling our kitchen right now and who is way behind. But I had to be thoughtful about not just delivering it in a way that might have felt good in the moment, but delivering in a way that could truly be received. And for simplicity, we like this model of situation, behavior, and impact. Sometimes we call it an SBI message to provide that along the way. And we know that sometimes we, in the effort of caring personally, we sugarcoat things, or we say nothing, something along the way. And then sometimes, for a variety of different reasons, we can be overly aggressive in our challenge and our feedback. But there's actually a large sweet spot where we can care for people personally and challenge them directly. And I think this really draws us back to the importance of empathy in creating an environment for care and accountability. And again, empathy is a topic that we could talk about for a long time. And I know we have experts on the call who've worked in and who teach about empathy at the most basic level, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Where I think the challenge comes out that I want to highlight today is, how do we think about creating empathy in the classroom? Some of you are experts at this. We'll have a chance for you to share some of those insights a little bit later. But how do we sometimes pause our intellectual focus that Patrick talked about in his video so that there's space for and there's openness for empathy as we walk into the spaces that we have? How do we make sure that we offer understanding responses? Well, I'm happy to listen. It sounds like you're saying, well, we're recognizing and identifying others. That must be hard for you. Or accepting, I hear what you're saying. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you told us. I'm glad you told the class. And avoiding some of these non-empathetic responses, like dominating. Here is my admission to you all. Even if I don't say the words under dominating, I, through my body language, sometimes when I'm up in front of a group, can give the implication, well, can you just get on with it there? We are behind my schedule for this class. Moving things forward. And I think that's where care and accountability comes in. It's not about not encouraging the class to move forward. It's not about having a plan for what we do, but providing an empathetic way to encourage people and not have that stated through our words or our actions and nonverbals along the way. And so an example of this for me, an incorrect example might be, Thomas, you're always late to meetings, or you're always late with your assignments. Well, it's rude and it's not fair to the people who made it on time. And a more powerful example could be, Thomas, during our morning meeting each week, Thomas, last week when you came to class late, I noticed that you often arrive late. As a result, we miss out on your thoughts. We've got to repeat items and things along the way. And so I'd encourage you to think about this as a model. It's simple, but it's something that we can share with our students, to engage with one another, that we can offer in our own experience of giving feedback to students and with other colleagues along the way. So that's a short section on feedback, but maybe the brief moment I'd offer is the true understanding that feedback is a gift. A colleague of mine said that to me, and I really love that phrase. When we can enter with the perception that feedback is a gift, we're more apt to give that gift to others, and we're more apt to receive that feedback in a different way. And I think that's the thing I would want to really focus on in our being, is the ability to live with the possibility that all feedback is a gift. And then we pull this together when we have purpose, when we have feedback, also the opportunity for measurement. We removed the scoreboard from this image, and whether you're playing global football or American football, or really any engagement, can you imagine playing that game, going to that competition without knowing the score in some capacity? And we sometimes have roles in our organization where this is happening. I've seen this extensively in Barry Wehmiller, often in manufacturing, where people work hard putting a machine together and don't know if we're on track or not, or don't know the impact of that on our company, on the outcomes of it, on our organization. Similarly, in the last 2 years especially, I've met many professors who may not know the score of how they're doing. I know it's common practice to have end of semester or end of class evaluations. And I've spoken with many of you, some who are on the call right now and some of your colleagues, about, well, that's something, but sometimes it's not the most helpful barometer of true performance. And sometimes it's only at the end of the class rather than something along the way. What we know is that there's neurological basis in the benefit of having small wins along the way. The chemical dopamine is released when, if you're like me and you like to create that checklist and check things off the list, that you get a small hit of dopamine along the way. Now, we don't want to be manipulative about this. Some gambling areas can manipulate this to say, all right, Bar, you're so close. Well, no, it's an algorithm. You're not actually any closer than you were when you started the game. But there can be positive aspects to looking at how we can provide progress along the way. And I find that marathons are a great example of this. They're just one example. But why do you have a mile marker each mile? People know what the route is generally. You're following hundreds or thousands of other people. But each time you reach that milestone, there's that release of dopamine to help you continue forward. And so particularly on long projects, collaborating in research together, rewriting content, student projects that they might feel are quite long that span multiple classes across a semester, or maybe even a capstone experience or something. How do we provide the milestones for those things along the way? And so to think about this, I'd like to offer you 2 different types of indicators. I think we've all heard of key performance indicators, or KPIs, at least in English. That's the acronym KPI, which are important. And they're those critical measures that are relatively common in whatever environment you're in. I listed some business metrics here. What are your sales? What's your on-time performance? What's your quality? But also those things around a university. What's our enrollment? What is the grade distribution at the end of a course? What is the student feedback on the end of an exam? What's our endowment like? Some various different indicators that are out there, but then also establishing targets to improve. Specifically for a class, for an academic year, what are things that we're looking to make a step change increase in, a significant increase in our performance, and to really draw those out and to show progress along the way. I've become a youth athletic coach for my 3rd grader, and I've made the commitment to help each one of the children, one of our players, create a personal growth goal for what they're going to try to achieve throughout the year. And so I've gotten through just the beginning of their year, and we're going to sit down next week and talk about what they want their goal to be. And oftentimes those individual goals can align to what is the organization, the team, the university trying to do to break through, and how do we make sure that there's a personal goal aligned to that to really personalize what the system is. And then can we make it visual? This is an example of visual that we use in manufacturing. It's got a calendar where each day is either green or red based on if we're on track. But there's so many different versions of this. If there's a benefit in our world today, there's lots of technology that allows us to create indicators. Well, what are our indicators in education? What are indicators in the classroom? Do our students know if they're making progress towards the ultimate objectives that they're looking to learn, or progress towards staying on track to meet the schedule of the class as things go through? And I think some professors are really good at providing people the opportunity for this, but how do we make this more visual? Whether it's during the class sessions, especially if we're doing virtual things online, how can we show people where they are? And then also, how do we build that into their growth across classes for full curriculum towards a degree? And so I offer this as just a thought experiment to consider what that could really look like. So I want to make sure that we have time for questions and reactions and other things. So I'm going to give you a summary of what's really stood out about these things in our experience in business and in the classroom. The first is, with a purpose, oftentimes there's a statement with no story. This isn't always the case, but there's a statement, there's a vision for an educational program or something, but there isn't a story. We need legends that can communicate wisdom to us. Legends maybe of an alumni or past student who had success with this, maybe of how it can impact things beyond just the class, but our organization. Maybe it's a personal story from our own experience. The second with feedback is it becomes a big deal because we do it infrequently. If I only tell my partner once a year that I love her, and once a year that there are some challenges in our relationship, boy, those come as really big deals, positively or negatively. But if it's something that happens more regularly, if it's something that's in the natural process of our classes, our interaction with colleagues, if it can be almost as natural as breathing or regular in every class session, then it becomes less jarring and less of a big deal. And for measurement, that it's not integrated within our daily experience. And my offer here would be, rather than pursuing precision, to pursue accuracy. There are times for precision, certainly in detailed research, but I find when we're talking about helping people have a spirit of accountability and care together, that often if we are accurate, meaning we're headed in the right direction, we're directionally correct, and it's helpful towards our endeavor, even if it's not absolutely precise, that can be helpful for people, particularly as they collaborate in project teams and other things. And so to exemplify this a little bit, I want to share a brief story from our organization. This is a picture of Jimmy Hughes. He recently retired from our organization, but I knew him for 17 years of his career. And the question really is Jimmy lazy? When I first walked around the plant, Jimmy, who runs a large machine tool called a lathe that's like 20 feet long, would frequently be leaning up against the machine with his eyes closed, head against the machine, moving forward. And so there was a large perception in the organization that Jimmy was lazy, that we needed to institute accountability with him and maybe even help him exit the organization. And the problem was that nobody actually went to talk to Jimmy. And when we finally listened to him, we engaged him with empathy. He said, hey, everybody, I can't walk more than 15 feet from my workstation for safety reasons, that if something were to happen as the machine is turning, I need to be there to hit the cutoff button and make sure everything goes well. But I don't have the materials within 15 feet of me to do my job. I can't set up the next job. I can't relate to other things. And I'm usually waiting hours for an engineer to answer my question. So the only way I get through the day is by leaning up against the machine, closing my eyes. I'm not sleeping. I'm just trying to make it through because there's nothing else that I can do. And what became really exciting, this is a picture of Jimmy leading a tour for a 4-star and several 3-star generals in the military. He led hundreds of tours through our Baltimore operation, providing not only a care and accountability for him, but then he was a steward of sharing that with many others along the way. And so that's what I hope for all of us, that when we unlock the opportunities of our students and our colleagues through care and accountability, that it can lead to amazing stories that continue to draw us forward. And we can do that by providing stories of purpose. We can do that by providing excellent feedback messages and for looking for visible, meaningful metrics that can drive us forward. So David, that's where I'm going to conclude this portion. What questions do we have along the way? We'll hit some questions and then move into a breakout session. I've got a scenario I'm going to give everybody in a breakout session in just a little bit. But David, where would you start me off at?
Well, Brian, thank you so much. This is, it's been really interesting. I've heard some of this before, but as you say, some of it's new, and it's always helpful, I think, to think about that the joining of care and accountability, that fundamental principle that everything else flows from, they're not in opposition to one another. So thank you for that. My first question to you, Brian, is you gave the example of Jim, who you saw the effects of care and about accountability on him. I'd be interested to hear from you. Do you have a story of a leader who has exemplified that for you, who has embodied care and accountability best for you? By the way, well, as Brian's answering this question, if you want to add any other questions, just type them in the chat, and then I'll lead through this Q&A session. But if you'd be willing to take that first question, Brian,
Absolutely.
and give an example if you have one.
Well, so if you're not familiar with our Barry Wehmiller case study from Harvard Business Review, I'd encourage you to check that out. It's a really good juxtaposition of care and accountability and strategy and culture, but it features the gentleman Ryan Gable, who's still a leader in our organization. He leads roughly a quarter of the business, so roughly $1 billion business along the way. And what he's really drawn me to is providing clear measurement along the way so that people know if we're winning or not. And if we're not, then be willingness to have tough conversations along the way. But it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise if we're not performing the way that we would want to. And then it's always delivered with respect. He's known as someone walking through the halls with kind of a deadpan expression. But when he needs to enter into a more challenging conversation, he actually leads with empathy and shows his smile more often. He actually walked up to me in the hall just last week and gave me a big hug for his thanks and gratitude. And he's not afraid to be vulnerable and make fun of himself. We have little skits here sometimes for all company presentations, and he's a ready participant in a skit. He's been an alien from outer space. I think he's been a deep sea diver or something, along the way. But it really draws that together. And he is very competent at what he do. He leads our hybrid equity group and does that phenomenally along the way. So hopefully that answers the question, David.
Thank you, Brian. I have another question about people have been talking about measurement in the chat. I think that's a clear thing. I wonder if you'd talk a bit more about how measurement works. Particularly, I've been struck here at Barry Wehmiller by the transparency with which we share information. So perhaps you could say a bit more about how you can do that measurement and communication of things a bit more effectively.
Well, let me talk theory for a second and then detail. So the theory of transparency, I think, is so important. And I don't want to judge any one of your individual institutions or different things, but we've run into a lot of organizations that want to withhold information for fear that if people actually knew the truth, they would do something bad. I don't even know what the anticipation of that is. And I'm mindful that there are competitive pieces of information that an organization might want to keep proprietary, but we always lean to sharing, particularly how the organization is doing, where we're strategically headed, and how people can help with that. And we think that engenders a lot of people pulling that same direction. So, I just walked through with David our profit totals and projections, revenue, warranty numbers, everything just a couple of days ago, because we want everybody in our organization to understand those things. In the universities I've engaged with, and I've engaged with all of them, obviously, wondering what visibility there is to what's really driving the university as a whole, or individual schools or programs along the way. Is the MBA program successful right now? I don't know. What are the key measures that define that along the way? And let's make them visible and help people see them, so it empowers people to take actions toward this. And that's probably the detail. Some organizations do have really good measures. Some are not opposed to sharing them more transparently, but it ends up being the 5th addendum to an email, or something that's the 50th page of a report, or something along the way. If we can offer anything from the manufacturing environment, we want to keep it to a few key metrics, and we want to literally make it visible and regularly talked about and updated along the way. And so many organizations do have communications teams aligned to their university or to their school. Boy, I'd encourage you to engage with that communications team and think about how you can make whatever measures of success you have much more visible and engaging. And I'm not sure if this is confrontational or not, but let's let our students know. I think our students are not just an audience for what we do, but they're also a partner in the education that we create. And if we believe that, then they should have transparency to what makes an effective undergraduate business school program or exec MBA program or something along the way, and invite them to be a key part of that. I think I'll stop there. I could keep going, David, but hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. And then just one more question. This is a bit more of a broad question. This webinar has been titled Care and Accountability. And I know that there's a lot of research going on in the business world talking about love. And some of the people that are doing that research are here on this call now, and they would use the word love. I'm interested to know where you think there could be overlap between the principles of care we've been talking about today and the concept of love.
I think it's a great question. And I think the difference in terms is mostly about perceived accessibility. What do I mean by that is if you hear Bob Chapman, our CEO, talk, or certainly in other organizations, it seems like a big step to talk about love. And for some, it's an easier step to talk about caring, particularly in environments that don't experience a lot of empathy or haven't talked about care or love or flourishing or any of a number of other words at all in their history. I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are many organizations, some represented by people here and many other businesses and places in the world where people have been talking about love and care and flourishing for a while. And so in those places, I think it's absolutely appropriate. I think it's about knowing the audience. For me personally, I don't think there's a better encapsulation, in English at least, of what we mean here of building an environment of care and accountability than to talk about love. Sometimes in the United States, at least, we use the phrase tough love, meaning giving someone feedback that can be difficult to hear, but is intended for their benefit because you have love or care for them. I think that's a big part of having a vibrant and successful organization or educational program. And at the same time, I'm very mindful that with how important words are, translations can sometimes obscure certain things. I'm not sure how tough love would be translated into Spanish or German or many other things. Some of you on this call could speak to that. But also in different environments, even within our own organization, whether care or love resound. I think the most important thing is to, one, be willing to talk about them. Two, be willing to have stories or legends, I use that word, to address them. And then three, to actually put them in practice through empathy and some of the behaviors that we have. And so, David, those are great questions. I will, and I see Jim's hand is raised. We will have a time for open dialogue in just a minute, but I want to put you in breakout rooms around a final scenario. And my hope here is it's one, a chance to connect with others on this call because that's part of our goal, but two, it's a chance for you to bring these concepts that I've talked about into stark relief in perhaps some of your own experiences. So you're going to go into a breakout room for about 8 minutes or so. And first, please introduce yourself to your colleagues, but then think about this scenario. You are working, sorry, typo there, you are working in a collaborative project with 3 other professors. An example might be working on a research paper together. It might be redesigning curriculum together, but it's a collaborative project with colleagues, with other professors. One member of the team missed the last deadline, let's say it was a week ago, and they skipped today's meeting. If the work that they are responsible for, accountable for, isn't completed within the next week, you will miss your deadline. And this isn't just a perceived deadline. You'll miss the submission to the dean, to the provost, to the committee, to the journal reviewing the paper, whatever example you want to pick there. I want you to think about what would you do? And you'll notice in my original diagram, it was what. So what would you do? How would you do it? Is there anything about the how that you would draw through? And what structures would you put in place, perhaps, to prevent a recurrence? And so we'll make sure we get all of that language in the chat for you. But David, if you've got the breakout session set up, I'd love to encourage you to engage in these breakout sessions to whatever degree you can with the video and audio that you have. Introduce yourself and think about these things along the way. I hope that was an engaging breakout session. You got a chance to meet others in this area and talk a little bit. And so with the remaining time we have, it's simply an opportunity, an open invitation. If you'd like to put some comments in the chat, or you'd like to raise your hand and come off mute, we invite you to share what the breakout session was about and or share an additional question or thought on today's topic. And so welcome to put a comment in the chat, or if anybody'd like to raise their hand, and David will call on you and get that comment, and I might respond to it, or a colleague might respond to it along the way. So would anybody like to start us off by raising their hand and sharing a comment or question?
Christine.
Yeah.
Hi. So it was an interesting talk that we had in room number 7 with Brian and Michael. So I think there was an agreement about how to start this conversation with empathy, asking this colleague how you're doing. Is there something going on that maybe prevented you from meeting the deadline? Also, starting with the general and then maybe tying it to the situation. But there was also something interesting. We talk about motivations, or what would be the incentives for this person or the different members of the group. And also we talked a little bit about the culture, like a country, because I said that in Latin America, we don't like to say no, we don't like to confront people. But there was also something about the internal culture, the organizational culture as well. Brian was sharing some examples about how conflict is managed or dealt with in his university. So it was interesting to notice these elements. And I wonder about the purpose. That will be like the discussion. But I have a question, because when you spoke about purpose, I was trying to think, how do I build this, for example, for a specific course? Should this be something like that emerged from the group, or that I bring to the group to propose to them as a purpose?
I'll give my specific response to that, but I think there's multiple approaches one could take. If your organization has a strong vision for the university as a whole, the school you teach in, the program that you're teaching as a part of, then it could be a nice little flow through that. Well, the vision of us is to create thinkers who will drive the world's businesses in the future. I don't know, making that up, off the spot. And then, all right, well, how does this class fit into that along the way? I think it's an appropriate thing, personally, for a professor or leader to set some degree of that vision. I think it can also be a really powerful exercise at the start of an engagement to say, all right, what do you want to get out of this class? What do we want to assign as a collective objective we have along the way? And not to get too tactical, I think some of that probably has to do with the length of the class, the age and development of the student, and certain things along the way. But I think it can be done either way. The key is it there? And do you, as the professor or facilitator, reference it? Because that's the other thing I find way too often. Time is put in to create something really good, and then we talk about it in the first class session and we forget about it. Well, and I know we're oftentimes utilizing physical spaces that are changing. We're in one room, and then we're not in there for another week, or the rooms are changing or something along the way. We can't just, put it up all on the wall. But even, can you bring a piece of flip chart paper in with you with each session and put it up? Can you write it on the dry erase board or in the chat or something at the start and make that visible to people? Christina, thank you so much. Jim, I know you had your hand raised before and you've got it raised again. What comment or question do you want to offer?
Two things. One is, how quickly can we get a copy of this session? We could use it in Waxan right away. I think it'd be very helpful. The second one is, the exercise for me was really great because it unconcealed some things about myself. My first answer was who I used to be. And for quite a while, it was, I would do it myself and get pissed off. And that is what I used to do. What got clearer on this as we did it was my response for quite a while has been assuming that something happened to that person and that could help. And so it's basically, what happened to you and, how can I help? But as I thought about that, I realized the second piece of it has been for quite a while that I know we'll get it done. The important thing is the people involved right now and healing what's happened to my colleague, because I work only with exceptional people now all around me. And probably that was always true, but I didn't know it. But now I know it, that they're exceptional. And so somehow we always get it done. And it doesn't, and if we don't get it done, we clean it up. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the love and relationships we have together so that we get things done over and over and over again, better and better and better.
Jim, thank you so much for that response. Particularly, I referenced a be, no, do framework earlier. Jim has just, referenced and exemplified that, and particularly the vulnerability to share about your own growth journey. There is a piece of being a professor and being in business schools that is about knowing. There's a piece of actually putting this to practice in our classroom about the doing. But what I think we just heard from Jim was a change in our own being. And I'll admit, I'm still on that journey. And I think I'm there a lot, but not 100% of the time, of when I'm interacting with a student, when I'm interacting with all of you, walking in with that intent and acknowledgement that the person on the other end is an incredibly beautiful, wonderful human being with dignity that deserves my love. And if I walk in with that intent, it's not that I don't give feedback, and it's not that I don't hold people accountable, but I do it in a different way. And ironically, I actually give that feedback more often when I'm acknowledging the dignity and the love for the other person on the other end. And if you take nothing else away from this session, I hope that's perhaps a potential takeaway. Jim, your other comment I put in the chat, we will definitely share this recording. Thank you to David for being our tech assist here, no later than Monday. And we would love for you to utilize this recording in your classes and other places. That's what the Humanistic Leadership Academy is all about. And so, David, I want to put one more thing up on the screen as I do that. Was there anything else that stood out in the chat to you, David, that we want to acknowledge before we conclude?
Some great things in the chat. I'd encourage people to have a look at it. The one thing is the thing I put in the chat, which you're bringing up here. I've put a link to our website where you can sign up for our next fall cohort. If you've not been through the HLL cohort, it's a great opportunity to connect with other people and hear and learn more about some of the things that we've been talking about today.
So I'll just briefly reference this because then I know we need to close. Thank you all. And I'm sure there was more comments and things along the way, but we will have our next cohort program starting up in February. You can begin signing up on the website now. David's given you that website link. We will do a spring webinar series. We're still formulating the speakers and the exact timing, but that will definitely be announced well in advance. And kudos to Michael Pearson and others. We're looking to host a conference in Fordham on rethinking business and rethinking business education. Details still to come, but we'd love to see many like-minded participants there and others who will continue to challenge our thinking. So I'm going to close the session there. I hope this entire series of webinars has been meaningful. If you missed one, we do have those recordings. We'd encourage you to go back and watch them. We'll make sure they're all available on the website. And I'm very appreciative for your engagement today. For those that celebrate any holidays coming up or maybe are in the midst of celebrating them, please have a wonderful holiday season and hopefully maybe a break from some of your semesters as well. Thank you so much. Have a great day.